Thanks for joining today's presentation on balancing nature and commerce in gateway communities. My name is Brian Fainer, and I'm with the National Park Service and help support our Connected Conservation effort. The Connected Conservation webinar series focuses on how NPS staff and partners can use various tools and strategies to conserve NPS resources at the landscape level. Working with gateway communities outside parks is critical to landscape scale conservation. As such, our webinar series is currently focusing on partnering with communities to further conservation. You can register for future webinars in this series and view past recordings by going to the Network for Landscape Conservation website. And there's a link to that website in the chat box. We will post a recording of today's webinar following the presentation. And throughout the presentation, feel free to plug in questions into the questions box. We'll look at everyone's questions following the presentation. And as a reminder, our webinar series is open to federal and state agencies, NGOs, and other conservation partners, so feel free to invite your colleagues to future webinars. We have two excellent presenters with us today. Kendra Brickley forges on-the-ground conservation solutions for the Conservation Fund by developing balanced economic and environmental results that meet the needs of diverse professionals. And since 2003, she has worked with communities nationwide, leading workshop design and delivery on balancing nature and commerce, facilitating entrepreneurial development, managing economic analysis, and conducting livability assessments from Oregon to South Carolina, Colorado to Michigan. Katie Allen leads the Conservation Fund's Conservation Leadership Network on a range of services related to innovative partnership programs, capacity building, trainings, sustainability consulting, and technical assistance. Since 2010, Katie has designed and led several initiatives for the Conservation Fund, including the Federal Lands Livability Initiative, the National Workshop on Water Quality Trading, and Appalachian Gateway Community Workshops and Sustainable Tourism Assessments. So Katie and Kendra, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. So it's really excited to be here. Again, my name is Katie Allen, and I'm going to kick off the presentation and have Kendra take on halfway through as well. So you'll hear from both of us. But just to give you guys a little bit of information about who we are and what we do. The Conservation Fund, if you aren't aware of us, we are a national environmental nonprofit organization, and we really work to make conservation work for America by creating solutions that make environmental and economic sense. We're top ranked for efficiency and effectiveness, and we have conserved 8 million acres of land across 50 states since 1985. Kendra and I are part of our Conservation Leadership Network, a program of the Conservation Fund, working on the ground to forge those partnerships and create conservation solutions. We'll be talking specifically today about our Balancing Nature and Commerce Technical Assistance Program, where we use a process designed to grow collaborative partnerships through our Conservation Leadership Network and through this program called Balancing Nature and Commerce in Gateway Communities, which really excels to bring people from different constituencies together to focus on what they agree on and the abundance of what they already have. And that's really that abundance of natural and cultural resources and outdoor recreation of opportunities. What we find is that the discovery of common ground propels the stakeholders from a wide range of backgrounds to identify and implement shared projects that can lay the foundation for ongoing success. We're going to talk more about the services that we provide within this program, but and they, just to give a little bit of teaser, they range from large national summits to place-based workshops and assessments. But to really start the conversation, we want to talk specifically to the role of gateway communities and what we mean by that. And this is what has really framed our work since 1999, using the role of the gateway communities to really think about what needs to happen in these very specific geographies that serve as the recreation portals to our nation's public lands and landscapes. They provide those locations for food and lodging and transportation and recreation services and all those businesses that support visitors as they make their way to those destinations. And if done right, these can be the magnets for businesses and working families and retirees, and really build a thriving destination, not just for tourists, but for residents as well. And of course, with every opportunity, there comes challenges, and we know that these types of being in this position can lead to seasonal populations and traffic congestion and escalating land prices. But there's really this opportunity to capitalize on a lot of the unique opportunities that these destinations provide. And so through this work, we really want to continue to build out an understanding of the barriers and opportunities that can support balancing nature and commerce through really the firsthand engagement of communities across the country. So some of those unique opportunities here today, we want to go through 4 of them. I'll outline the first 2, and Kendra is going to hop in on those 3rd and 4th ones. But through this, we want to build some context for the unique opportunities that present themselves to gateway communities, especially those in rural landscapes. And much of the information today we will be using to frame those communities that can build an asset-based economy. And there are many more communities out there that are very matured in their role as a gateway community. They are hard at work addressing and adapting to the unique challenges and opportunities being a gateway community provides. But they all start somewhere, and they continue to demonstrate really these values in their planning and investment and community engagement and stewardship. So we want to call out these 4 today. So when we're talking about capitalizing on economic drivers and contributions, it's really a lot of things happening in the landscape. And these are just some quotes from public research that's really drawing out that there's a lot of opportunity here. And what we're seeing on the landscape is that consumers in general are spending more money in dining out and on travel and recreation, and less money on material possessions. And experiential travel, focusing on these experiences rather than consumer goods, for instance, are offering travelers the chance to create once-in-a-lifetime memories through either a cultural exchange or a wildlife encounter. There's also opportunities for policymakers that are beginning to support growth in rural areas and see what they can do to focus on these great opportunities and capitalize them. And also we're seeing that partnerships that rely not on just government, but also the interface between businesses and nonprofit partners are coming to light as well. And this is essential mix, and we're lucky to see more of that grow. And I'll say that there's also been an elevation of data, visitation, economic impacts, activities that are providing more and more information, and I'm going to touch on some of those as well. And I think what's really great also as part of this is that it's those rural communities that are leading the change, not just from the bottom up, but sometimes even a bootstrap approach, seeking to really make change and find solutions locally and moving beyond traditional economic development models to make it happen. So in terms of economic drivers, I mean, I think a lot of these are, pretty familiar to folks, but to know that the communities are looking at capitalizing on, here's just 3, I think, but some of these are really big numbers. So understanding the types of assets and activities a community has and looking at it nationally, these are generating billions in recreation. So just a couple up on the screen, but knowing that there's knowing what types of assets and activities are in a community can be a big game changer. Numbers of visits, this is really representing the annual draw of folks to these destinations. The data around this is just outstanding, and knowing this locally can also, again, be a big economic driver. So knowing that more than 760 million people visit state parks annually, that's more than 2 visits for every person in the United States. 150 to the Forest Service, and over 1 billion visitors to the National Park Service. So those are a lot of people making these trips to these destinations. And of course, knowing the types of visitors, who are these folks coming to visit? What do they look like? What are going on? And just a couple here to highlight, a cultural heritage traveler makes up 78% of the US tourists that take part in cultural heritage activities. So 78% of folks that are touring the country are looking for cultural heritage experiences. They're often frequent travelers. They spend more money. 40% of 46% of their total spending is on activities and dining and shopping. So that's money that's coming into communities. Even if you look at specific activity users, like folks know how big the birding community is growing. And in the United States, birders number in tens of millions and spend upwards of $20 billion per year on things like birdseed and travel and birding paraphernalia. Average yearly spending by active birders averages about $1,500 to $3,500 a year, with travel being a major expenditure of that. You can also look at the profiles of a mountain biker. The demographics for mountain bikers in general are very similar to those mountain bikers who would travel for mountain biking. And they're mostly male between the ages of 25 and 44 and relatively affluent. So what does that mean? It means that they're going to stay longer at a location. They're going to spend potentially $600 to $100 each day. And so this is just great data to know. And knowing these visitors and how they can drive can really tell a community how they can drive actions to capitalize on these types of preferences and needs. But I would say it's important not to leave residents out of this discussion. They are going to be the ones that are pushing through during this shoulder seasons, supporting local businesses, and probably going to be your number one group that's going to bring in that next visitor for their first experiences and hopefully generating the next repeat customers. So thinking about how to include residents in all of this is going to be a major theme throughout. And of course, the economic contributions, I think everybody's hopefully seen the Outdoor Industries Association's kind of annual wrap up of the economic contributions of the outdoor recreation economy. But knowing, visitors to national parks spend an estimated $20 billion in local gateway communities, and how this ripples and multiplies, it creates an effect that reaches $40 billion in economic output. Similarly, you could say in forest service lands contributes more than $13 billion to the national economy, and that's supporting over 200,000 jobs each year. And for small businesses, that includes more than 5,000 outfitters and guiding companies that are going to benefit from just being in proximity of these national forest lands. So what we say to communities is really to dig up your local stats, find this data, know the drivers and economic contributions, and then understanding where you need to plug your leaky bucket. So you know that this money is staying in your community, it's multiplying, and it's generating wealth locally. The second kind of big, unique opportunity for these communities is really to build an asset-based economic development model. And coming from those economic drivers and contributions, gateway communities are positioned better than any communities to take on an asset-based economic development value chain, as sort of demonstrated through this graphic. I'm going to take us quickly through this value chain to demonstrate how natural, cultural, and outdoor recreation assets can support a network of businesses and wealth generation in a community. I won't have time to go through in depth the foundational elements noted on the bottom, but perhaps another webinar for the future. These elements really present the readiness factors for a community to take on this type of economic development. And each community and its leaders must be focused on the collaboration it takes and the value of each of these by putting them to work in policy and investments. So just understanding that equitable access for all really means for all different abilities, socioeconomic statuses, cultural, generational, and other opportunities to connect access to a range of destinations and activities. Safety, critically important for any visitor and resident who uses any of these destinations or assets to pursue activities, and know that it's going to be safe and services available if something went wrong. Of course, stewardship, this is a value chain that is dependent on the sustained management of the assets to build out all of these opportunities. Building a stewardship ethic among users, as well as the investment needed to sustain these destinations, is critical, and Kendra is going to touch on that a little bit more. And livelihoods, I think this is what kind of the intro for the economic development, and those drivers are really just going to further emphasize that all of this should value livability and thriving communities, not just jobs and money, but great places for kids to grow up, great places to start businesses, great places for an opportunity to thrive. So just breaking down that wheel a little bit, we're going to look at destination and assets. These activities. These are all generally physical places that provide an experience, whether it be cultural, natural, related to food or history. Some of these places are abundant are abundant in these types of destinations, and some places need to get creative. This is an example from Potter County, Pennsylvania. Of course, a first step for any community is to inventory their assets. And that's just what this county did. And they, at first, didn't feel like they had much until one resident said, hey, you know, have you ever looked up at the stars at night? And turns out in this darkest place on the east side of the Mississippi, they had a gold level international dark sky park in the making. So it takes creativity in a community, but every place can be a destination filled with activities if you focus on what is unique and special. In terms of amenities, these goods and services, gateway communities provide the basic goods and services for those headed to the nearby destinations. Usually it's going to be those necessities of food, gas, and lodging just to start. This presents an opportunity for communities, again, to think creatively in how those basic necessities can fold into the fabric of the community and support assets and destinations. It's a great opportunity for revitalization and redevelopment, supporting the preservation of the past, as well as preventing the need for additional greenfield development, but thinking about even infill in brownfield. So here's just a couple looks at that. You know, we've got a tank garage winery in Calistoga, California. And if you haven't seen Yazoo City, this is their colorful historic Main Street that was on the verge of really failing and falling into disrepair. And all it took really was a handful of businesses that closed and moved out, and folks were, you know, really scared for the future of their community. As a result, a small group of local businesses purchased these buildings, made repairs, worked tirelessly to bring in new businesses, and thanks to just what they did, this brightly painted downtown now provides shops on the downstairs floor, but then a really unique opportunity for lodging on that second floor. So this is an example of being creative in those amenities and goods and services to go beyond just what could be generic to really celebrate what is unique. In terms of rental along the value chain spectrum, this is really the next step that builds businesses that directly cater to those activities and destinations your community serves as a gateway. So like along the Virginia's Creepers Trail, bike rental and shuttle services is going to make folks' trips to ride the Creeper Trail that much more convenient, takes the guests' work out, and especially for those looking to rent, maybe not fully commit to buy, this is an opportunity to really experience this unique outdoor recreation opportunity. Further moving that along, you say that the next is the outfitters and guides, like the Roanoke Outdoor Adventure Center here. Just one example of what an outfitter could do, and this is along the Roanoke River in North Carolina. They provide the full experience. These services usually couple with rental services, but have experienced people in each of the activities that starts to build a network of activities and relationships to grow these types of businesses that can further extend folks' trips, introduce them to new opportunities, and instill maybe that next visit to that destination so they can even see more. I think retail is pretty self-explanatory. Once you've got, you know, those rentals and the outfitters and guides coming together, you can start to see those bike shops pop up, your fly fishing shops, any place where the gear for the adventures can be purchased. It can also go beyond that retail shops and support all the unique local opportunities for great stuff to buy, especially for visitors to take home with them. So what could that look like? It could be looking like around art and supporting local artisans, really celebrating the destination and all of the great inspiration it can create for artisans. And I think food, absolutely food. This is going to be loved by tourists and residents alike, something you can take home and really experience when you're back home. Wholesale is for those local food and artisans and other businesses that might find that they can scale their local shops to become wholesalers, where they can stock artisan centers, or like here in Kentucky, or across region stores and even beyond. I think the internet provides an ability to connect all of us to a global market, and these wholesale marketplaces create a unique supportive network of locally made products that can reach a global audience. I'd urge all of you to visit the J.Q. Dickinson Appalachian Mercantile, which was developed to bring the amazing food, crafts, and homes and bath goods of the Appalachian region to and their artisans to the world. There's definitely a lot of talent being showcased here and curated to connect folks to this region, and it's really great to see this online platform for wholesaling come about. There's also, examples from across the country. I also wanted to highlight in the Pacific Northwest, the Hummingbird Wholesale, which is a family-owned organic food manufacturer and distributor that incorporates humanity into the business relationship. So they're choosing products that are carefully considered for their sustainability and farming practices and ingredients, and they're on contract with regional farmers for a variety of crops to distribute retail lines within their online wholesaling. And this is just an opportunity that kind of creates opportunities in a pipeline for these farmers to know that there's going to be reliability in consumers. And again, both of these are examples that demonstrate how important potentially broadband internet access is, reliable connections to the world to distribute wholesale products that can be created locally. When it comes to manufacturing, we're going to talk about, small scale manufacturing. That's really, again, going to elevate those assets and activities in a community. And you might find that manufacturing can return to a downtown like a Misty Mountain Thread Works, which locally sources materials, looks for local skilled workers, represents the climbing culture of Western North Carolina as they are building these harnesses and ropes for climbing that can be tested and used in the great climbing destinations in North Carolina, as well as manufactured and distributed across the country. Tons of great examples like this. We've got snowboarder manufacturers in Tahoe that those boards are being developed and engineered and ridden in the mountains around Tahoe, or the fly fish rods that are being built in small batches out of Maine, that are really going to be able to be used when you come to that destination, manufactured and again, sold across the country and beyond. So I think some of the things that are great in kind of wrapping this up is to say, it's working when you start to see beyond just maybe those activity related manufacturing and businesses come on, where you start to see larger groups of economic investment being made based on how wonderful the assets of an area are. So I think what's great in sort of Traverse City as an example is what they found was the most leads for new businesses and relocation of talent were a result of people visiting to the region and then wanting to live there. So they started a new campaign that seeks to capitalize on that trend and make it easier to fulfill that dream. And similarly, I think Sierra Nevada looking to East Coast opportunities and knowing that Asheville provided a great hotbed for employees, as well as the assets that would be catering to the needs of their company. And maybe even as nanotechnology or hedge funds from New York City moving to these great destinations so that their employees can also experience a high quality of life, high amenity location outside of the hustle and bustle of a city and connect to these opportunities. So here I'm going to turn it over to Kendra to talk through the next unique opportunities for Gateway communities and talk specifically to community and asset stewardship, and then building partnerships and collaboration.
Great. Can people hear me? This is Kendra.
I can hear you.
Great. That's all that matters. So thanks, Katie. I really love those examples, ways that you really put some work into finding even more than we already have. So lovely to see those. In contrast, here's another community. We call it Anywhere USA, because we're all too familiar with this kind of landscape. And even though the cars are a little bit dated in this picture, we still see landscapes like this across the country. And it gives us pause and measure to really focus in on supporting the assets and community stewardship in the over 700 communities that we've worked in, and the additional communities that we look forward to working with. Let's see. Okay, Katie, move that along. Thank you. So focusing next specifically on community stewardship, we really like to use this quote from Mark Twain because it really provides a perspective of how we focus in on our communities as well, kind of providing that contrast, so or that connection between these. So we take stock of a city like we take stock of a man. The clothes or appearance are the externals by which we judge. So this kind of example is really important as you think about your own community and to consider how development reflects your community or when it doesn't. One short example is looking at chain stores like the McDonald's here. And as we go through this, think back to the earlier quote by Mark Twain and reflect on what these examples provide in terms of community stewardship. We're thankful to Ed McMahon of Urban Land Institute and the past vice president at the Conservation Fund for these slides because they really provide a perspective of how we can think differently about our landscapes and our communities. So here, let's focus in on franchises and chain stores. Here's the traditional McDonald's, right? And you can say, everybody has seen this around the landscape, but next slide. With a little bit of work and energy, you can get a different model, a little bit nicer, a little bit sort of trendier. So, but with even dropping a little bit, moving a little bit further, Katie, if you could, thank you. Here's the McDonald's in New Hyde Park, New York. Imagine a McDonald's where prospective brides actually come to take wedding pictures in front of the McDonald's. Think about how different this image is compared to the past two images and what you think about the community just by looking at this and realizing this historic home was preserved and McDonald's had to go through all the work to ensure that it met the community standards. Next slide, please. Here is Sedona, Arizona's McDonald's. It is the only McDonald's with turquoise arches rather than golden arches. Or the next slide. How different the feel is when we go to the McDonald's outside of Yellowstone, using the metal roof, the rustic wood, the stone walls, and even a chainsaw carved bear in the front of the restaurant. So moving on asset stewardship, we're going to talk a little bit about a couple examples in this on how we engage visitors in supporting stewardship. So it's not just within the communities and the residents. There's certainly the perspectives that we just shared, but also engaging visitors in supporting that stewardship. So for example, let's start with voluntary surcharges. We've worked with a lodge owner in East Zion who added a surcharge to visitors of his cabins and lodges. He allowed an opt-out, but almost everybody just paid the small fee because they realized how special this place was. More recently, that same landowner has convinced other businesses in the region to also provide stewardship surcharges, so moving through the community and its businesses. Also, the Zion Park project has created, the Zion National Park Forever project has created this field guide, which is just a great resource and idea. So this was the Friends group who created this annual field guide indicating how to support the park's needs, which range from protecting native bird species, engaging youth, and protecting cultural resources like restoring the historic smithy. So people can pay in and whatever amounts to help support these priority stewardship elements within the park. Next slide, please. Next, we're going to turn our attention to the Las Cruces Green Chamber of Commerce and talk about stewarding your community by investing locally. Las Cruces is the home of the Oregon Mountains Desert Peaks National Monument. Leaders there started the Green Chamber of Commerce to acknowledge the support of local businesses. They also feature a green gift guide and offer community learning from residents to residents. So really thinking about that connectivity and potential from going further than a traditional Friends group to really think so deeply about the stewardship. What they found is that money spent locally stays locally. Several studies have shown that. In fact, one of the studies that they share is that for every $100 spent at a locally owned business, $45 went back into the community and into their tax base. And in contrast, for every $100 spent at a chain store, only $14 came back. The local owners are local contributors. So local businesses give a greater amount of money to local causes, and nonprofits receive an average of 350% more support from local businesses and the business owners than they do from non-locally owned business. And of course, they also directly inject money into the local economy through payments of wages and benefits to local residents. Next slide, please. For a couple other examples, one, Preservation Ale from Marin County, California, supports their county parks and other community giving. There are a number of breweries that, who do this. Somehow it seems to fit so well together. The Preservation Ale and supporting natural resources is a great connection. Or Milford, Michigan's Bike Fest. They provide guided access to over 100 miles of prime bicycling routes during the Bike Fest and Trail Challenge, and the proceeds also benefit trail conservation. Next slide. What the Conservation Fund is really focused in on in our work is building capacity for partnerships and collaboration. We've worked with over 700 communities across the U.S. And Canada, and we're proud to say that just over last week, we had our first team from Puerto Rico participate in our course. We're thrilled about that. We really work to build the capacity using a process designed to increase collaboration. Our work in the Balancing Nature and Commerce program and in the Conservation Leadership Network really excels at bringing people together to focus in on what they agree on and thus increase capacity within their own community. Other skills include toolkits, workshops, economic analysis, and more. But we find when people sit down in teams and work together, they're able to find the common ground that's so critical for building that capacity and the results. Next slide, please. So as Katie mentioned, she reviewed the first couple areas of this, and we've talked about a little bit about the other areas as some of the strongest opportunities for gateway communities to really thrive. Our technical assistance program builds out these focused areas through the expertise that we have and bring to the table, and creating that capacity among communities so that they spur action locally. We'll talk about some examples of that action planning in just a moment, some specific examples. But we use that team-based approach to help communities create catalytic projects. Often we coach folks to focus in on low-hanging fruit, to get people working together and find out what they agree on, and then finding those win-win-win solutions by sharing the resources and leveraging partnership and investments. Next slide. So this schematic really shows the suite of services that we have within for Gateway Communities from the Conservation Fund. Leading you over from what the starting point is, all the way over across and to touching in on destination development. How we implement and build that out is something that we work with communities specifically to get those kinds of results. The suite of services that the fund provides aligns with the readiness of a community to engage in these areas of focus. Some communities are just starting out in the process, while others are highly successful and in need of specific technical advice. We work on both sides of that. We can plug in anywhere along the spectrum with support to catalyze the momentum towards a community's goals. This includes some of our products and services that are listed here. We offer the national course on balancing nature and commerce, held annually at the National Conservation Training Center, where Katie and our other colleague Margarita work as well. We also offer regional workshops. When we're invited in, we do tailored and place-based programs to communities across the country. We've also delivered on many assessments, customizing topics on things like outdoor recreation, sustainable tourism, and livability, as Katie had mentioned earlier, and I'll touch on a little bit deeper in just a moment. Also, we held the first National Summit for Gateway Communities in 2018, and we're working towards the next National Summit coming soon in 2021. So look out for that, and we welcome partners and sponsors and other ways to work together as we move forward on that. Next slide, please. Out of that 2018 National Summit for Gateway Communities, we found, we asked the participants to identify their priority needs from those fields for Gateway Communities. Those are listed here, and how important it is to really build a strong community by addressing these kinds of issues and needs from across the country. Now, each community is different. Some are going to prioritize differently along this spectrum or along this listing, but those are all elements that I think every community touches on at some time. Next slide, please. Finally, I want to talk about a couple examples that we work on. We've got a whole bunch of them on our project pages on our website. Feel free to look at those, but just touching in on two for right now today. First, here is the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia, home of the city of Lexington and Rockbridge County. Now, not everybody knows, but over $21 billion is spent in Virginia on outdoor recreation each year. But many travelers have traditionally been unfamiliar with Rockbridge and its tourism-related amenities. The area does have a large number of recreational draws, including over 100,000 acres of public forests and parks for camping, hiking, biking, fishing, and hunting. The region is also filled with historic sites and cultural experiences showcasing crafts, music, art, and food. In 2014, a team of leaders from Rockbridge attended the the Balancing Nature and Commerce workshop to take inventory of their natural assets and build a vision for outdoor recreation and economic development around them. Next slide, please. Rockbridge participants established the Rockbridge Area Outdoor Partnership called RAUP, R-A-O-P, a collection of partners, local governments, businesses, public land managers, and of course the county, cities, and the towns, the small towns of the area. Together they consolidated and incorporated past trail and blue waste planning efforts and support the economic stewardship, community health, and wellness goals across all the jurisdictions. Resources provided inspiration from the workshop, the Balancing Nature and Commerce workshop, and the RAUP set out to create a master strategic plan. Leveraging the workshop and a technical assistance award from National Park Service's Rivers, Trails, and Conservation Assistance Program, in addition, developed the capacity of the community to finalize the 2017 Rockbridge Area Outdoor Recreation and Trail Plan, which came to be an action plan to generate jobs and small business opportunities based around an outdoor recreation economy. And this quote here is from Jean Clark, the Director of Tourism for Lexington and Rockbridge area, and really just demonstrates how impactful they felt it was in participating in this process. Next slide. We're moving now to the Rocky Mountain National Park and Grand Lake, Colorado, the wetter and better of the park in their estimation. Great little place. It's one of the two gateway communities, Grand Lake, Colorado, and Estes Park on the other sides of the mountain. Rocky Mountain National Park, so we were asked to bring this project together, and Rocky Mountain National Park was chosen as one of 4 nationwide livability assessments with the support of the Federal Highway Administration's Federal Lands Program. This is an example of our assessment of technical services. This project had 2 goals. One, for communities to foster livability and a sustainable local economy by developing action plans for implementation through the Grand Lake Community Livability Assessment and Recommendations Report. That is also available on our website. You're free to take a look at that. In addition, it also, the additional goal was to help Federal Highway Administration and public land managers who are the users of the Federal Land Access Program, or FLAP, to provide a better understanding of the types of needs and investments related to gateway communities so that the FLAP program can adjust accordingly or better assist in supporting livability needs such as access and transportation opportunities. Next slide. These are some of the outcomes from the recommendations report, which is on the right. The community had their elementary school just about a year before we were there. So they've really emphasized on working on providing alternatives there. So there's all kinds of nature-based learning there, as well as things like pickleball, and it's getting used in a phenomenal way. Also, rehabilitation of the West Portal Bridge and the connectivity to both trails and access for vehicles, streetscape improvements, wayfinding, and the creation of the Grand County and Grand Lake Creative District, which has helped support artisans and creative industry in the area, and has even attracted the attention of the state of Colorado as they provide affordable housing for creative industry development. So I think that's the last slide. If you want to go forward, well, actually just a couple more, just summing up some of the upcoming opportunities. Next slide. As I mentioned, the National Summit for Gateway Communities, we are working on a location and specific date. Please look out for that. We'd love to hear from you. Also, the National Balancing Nature and Commerce Workshop for 2021, that will be in April at Shepherdstown, West Virginia. And our Appalachian Gateway Communities Workshop, we're working on the dates for that as well. So next slide, and this will be the final one. Please feel free to get in touch with Katie or I. We've had the pleasure to briefly share this information and our experiences and expertise with you. And we welcome questions or thoughts for making our shared purpose even stronger. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Katie and Kendra. Awesome presentation. And it looks like we've got a number of questions that have already come in here. Let's see. We got a couple questions relating to whether or not folks can get access to your slides, your presentation slides.
Yeah, if that's something you make available to folks, we can PDF and have that somewhere.
It might be, I'm just thinking it might be easiest, folks, for those interested, just to email Katie and Kendra directly, because we don't have an easy way. It'll be longer for me to do that. So I would just email Katie and Kendra. Thank you. Here's another question about the the branding of the McDonald's. A lot of companies like McDonald's or others would kind of resist efforts to try to because they could be more costly, for being more innovative, with fitting in with a cultural landscape or community plan and things like that. So are there any best practices or advice for communities and try to push or encourage companies to to do something special in some of these instances?
Yeah, this is Kendra. May I? Can you hear me?
Yeah, go for it. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a great question. It comes out a lot, and it's really one of cost versus value, and the power of the ask. Again and again, we hear from the communities that have found their way of securing ideas for alternatives for chain stores and franchises, has really been they've gone up and asked and said, hey, our community, if you want to come to our community, they're coming to the community because they value it. So if they're valuing that place, then you've got a chit there that you can work with them to really help them understand that you value your community and they're coming in. Please really respect our community character and simply ask them for it. That's really the power of this.
Great. Here's another question on the information and materials that report for Grand Lake. How can folks get access to that report?
Yeah, I think again, probably easiest to email us so we can direct you to the link. But if you do Google Federal Lands Livability Initiative, you will see the, hopefully it should connect, I've done this before, to the Conservation Fund's website under our Conservation Leadership Network. The 4 PDFs of the chosen gateway communities of that project, all of the assessments are publicly available on our website for download.
Great. Okay, what are the top things a community can do to improve its appearance, starting with some basics? Is there a place to find these kinds of proven suggestions? For example, banning billboards.
Mm. Well, one, I know you can definitely come to our course. We talk a lot of this about this, and we do have resources again around this. There's several publications around compatible development, and I know Scenic America does a lot of work specifically around billboards and that use of things. Along the lines of Kendra's answer to the franchising, there's also some examples around, especially around voluntary guidelines for building facade, signage, those types of things. If you are a community and you work and you have a vision for what you want to look like, and hopefully potentially it's opposite of Anywhere Town USA, that you are going around and you're snapping pictures. This is probably the easiest low-hanging fruit, taking pictures of the signs that you'd like to have in your community, the examples of the building vernacular that you would like to see be repeated throughout your community, especially when a new, maybe a building goes up, or an opportunity to redevelop an building and maybe downtown, is that you have the spectrum of what things should look like. And this can be in a manual and something that you provide to that developer or that sign creation person, that you already have that established aesthetic so that it can be implemented as one really great, easy first step. So you're really knowing what you have in your community and what it wants to look like. And Kendra, do you have any other ones?
No, I think you've covered it well.
Cool. All right, well, here's another one. How would you describe the role of public land and water agencies in these community development initiatives? And how can the agencies be supportive of partners and participants?
Thanks for that. I'll take it. So, yeah, it's critical to have public land managers and water agencies involved in the process. They're really the foundation, the natural resource protection of our communities. Building out further to the economics and community, we really need to be working together, and why we have the program on balancing nature and commerce. We typically asked for a public land manager to be part of the team, as well as local government official, and building out the team approach for that workshop on economics and community development. And I like that the connection that you expressed here, both the community development connecting to public lands, because that is really so important to support the efforts moving forward. And why it's so powerful to have the results of the project that we get is because those people are at the table and working together to find the common ground so they can move to get forward together.
Yeah, and I think there's, in the practical sense of the relationships, is that there's a lot of interaction that can be going on. And public land managers hold a lot of that data around visitation. They know what the visitors need in terms of services through surveys or other types of opportunities that those public land management agencies either do part of their own planning or maybe can work in collaboration with the community. They know where stewardship needs to happen on those public land managed areas and how that might relate to access needs by guides and outfitters or trail user groups. And can there be collaboration with the Friends group to raise money with the business community to make sure that there's shared stewardship of those resources? Or vice versa, is there opportunities in the development of that public lands that might also support economic goals in the community, whether it's signage, of changing where the signs for access points might be that might more close activities, shared a cooperative marketing of assets and things to do in downtowns as well as in the surrounding area, not just, again, having folks be sent straight to that trailhead or, whatever it might be. So thinking about all of those communication opportunities really start with, as Kendra said, just having a sit down to understand where the shared values are and making sure that that is instilled in that partnership and something that policy, investments, partnership continue to have into the future.
Great. I'm going to sneak in one last question here real quick. I'm really interested in that example that you guys gave for Zion Forever and some of the conservation projects, I guess, that they developed. In that example or others, is it usually how would you describe that relationship between friends groups and some of these proactive business owners? I mean, for like the Zion example, were they working for Zion Forever? Were they working with a NGO or a friends group on some of these ideas, or was it mostly kind of private businesses kind of driven? Like, how does that? What happened in Zion, and what do you see more broadly in terms of the role that private companies play versus kind of partnering with a friends group?
Yeah, well, this is Kendra. So in terms of the voluntary surcharge, that's something that was started by the landowner that he just did on his own accord. But then as time went by and his discussions with Zion National Park's friends group that was listed there, the Zion National Park Forever project, he's definitely engaged with them and with other businesses surrounding Zion National Park, saying, if we live here and we need to invest back in the community. That's where it connects kind of to the Las Cruces example, that, it's the pride of place, really. And as well, in terms of the field guide, that was something that, interestingly enough, the head of the Zion Park Forever effort had worked on that, I think, in Grand Teton as well. And so when he came recently to Zion National Park, probably like about 3 years ago, maybe a little bit more, he wanted to work on that explicitly. And again, it was engagement with the park, of course, and then with other landowners and partners across the area, nonprofits as well.
Great. Yeah, I think I remember seeing a news article about Zion Forever actually putting some conservation easements in place on the east side of Zion.
Yes.
So yeah, they're
absolutely.
doing some really cool stuff.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Katie and Kendra. Awesome presentation, and thanks everyone for the great questions. Before I hand it back to Katie and Kendra for some final words, parting words, I wanted to remind everyone that our next webinar for our Connected Conservation webinar series is on March 10 at 3 o'clock Eastern Time. And the title is NPS Partnership Tools to Enhance Gateway Communities. And so we're going to have Bob Radcliffe and Donnie Ledbetter, who are with the Park Service Partnership Office. They're going to give a presentation on how, provide an overview of all those great partnership tools that are available to enhance gateway communities, improve connectivity with parks, and encourage sustainable tourism. So essentially, it's kind of an overview of kind of the services and opportunities that we can provide to gateway communities as well. All right, yeah, Kendra, Katie, any final parting words?
Just want to say thanks so much for your questions and your time today. We've really enjoyed it and look forward to hearing from you.
Great. Well, thank you again, everyone, for joining. And again, you can sign up for future webinars by going to the Network for Landscape Conservation website. We've got all our planned webinars there, and a recording of this webinar will be posted there as well. So thanks again, everyone, for joining.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
Thanks.